The sun was a hot iron pressed against the back of my neck as I walked the 3 blocks to Miller's grocery. The $10 bill was damp, stuck to the skin of my palm by a layer of nervous sweat. I kept my eyes on the cracked sidewalk, counting the steps. I didn't want to look at the people in their cars or the moms pushing strollers. They had air conditioning. They had dinner plans. I had a piece of paper with Alexander Hamilton's face on it and 42 days of silence ahead of me.
The fuse is lit. Don't be in the dark when the truth explodes. Subscribe to join the circle. Drop a like if you think karma finally collected its debt today. Have you ever had to light a fuse to save yourself? Tell your story below. We're listening.
Inside the store, the air smelled like floor wax and overripe bananas. The fluorescent lights hummed, a low, buzzing vibration that seemed to rattle around inside my skull. I grabbed a red plastic basket. My hand was shaking so hard the handle clattered against the side. I forced my fingers to lock. Independent, I reminded myself. I'm a big girl. I headed straight for aisle 4. The peanut butter sat in rows like little soldiers. I looked at the name brands, the stuff my mom usually bought. $6 a jar. My stomach gave a sharp, twisting pinch, like a pair of pliers grabbing my insides. I couldn't afford the good stuff. I reached for the very bottom shelf and grabbed 2 jars of the store brand tan sludge. The labels were plain, just blue text on white paper. $3.25 each. That was $6.50. Next was the bread. The cheap white loaves felt like sponges in their plastic sleeves. I found a loaf for $1.90. The math started running through my head like a fever. $6.50 plus $1.90. That left me with $1.60. I stood in front of the ramen bricks. They were 12 cents each if you bought the individual ones. I counted them out, my breath hitching as I tucked 10 packages into the corner of the basket. My head felt light. I was doing it. I was winning the game. I'd have peanut butter for protein, bread for filling, and salt for the nights when the hunger felt like a physical weight. I walked to the register. The cashier was a woman with gray hair and a name tag that said Gloria. She didn't even look at me. She just swiped the jars across the scanner. Beep, beep, beep. $10.45, Gloria said, staring at a point somewhere over my left shoulder. The air left my lungs in a sudden rush. My pulse spiked in my ears, a loud, rhythmic thud. What? I managed to whisper. Tax, honey. $10.45. I looked down at the $10 dull. It looked smaller now. Pathetic. I felt a hot, prickly heat crawl up my neck and into my cheeks. People were waiting behind me. A man cleared his throat. I felt their eyes like needles in my back. I had to choose. I reached into the basket and pulled out the loaf of bread. I don't want this, I said. My voice was thick, like I'd swallowed a handful of dry wool. She swiped it off the total. $8.55. I handed her the bill. She gave me a single dollar and some change. I stuffed the jars and the ramen into a plastic bag and bolted for the exit. The plastic handles dug into my fingers, the weight of the peanut butter pulling my shoulders down. When I reached my driveway, I saw something that made the generic peanut butter feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. A man in a high-visibility vest was standing by the side of our house. He held a long metal tool and a clipboard. I froze by the mailbox. My heart wasn't just thumping anymore. It was trying to kick its way out of my chest. He turned a valve and the sound of rushing water, the lifeblood of the house, simply stopped. "Hey," I called out, my voice cracking. "What are you doing?" The man looked at me, his face set in a look of bored pity. "Non-payment, kid. The account is 3 months behind. Water's off until the balance is cleared." He didn't wait for me to answer. He just hopped into his truck and drove away. I stood there, clutching my bag of dry noodles and 2 jars of peanut butter that I couldn't even wash down. I looked at the house. It looked like a tomb. I walked to the front door, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and that's when I saw the final blow. A bright orange sticker slapped across the deadbolt. Warning, gas service discontinued. No water, no stove, Just me, a dead credit card, and 2 jars of peanut butter that I couldn't even wash down. The house didn't just feel empty anymore, it felt dead. By the end of the first week, the air was thick and smelled like unwashed clothes and the sour tang of the trash can I couldn't empty. The silence was a physical weight, a ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop. Without the hum of the water heater or the hiss of the pipes, every tiny sound, the house settling, a bird hitting the window, sounded like a gunshot. My throat was a desert. My tongue felt like a piece of dry leather tucked behind my teeth. I had spent day 6 licking condensation off the windows from the morning dew, but the thirst was a constant, throbbing ache behind my eyes. I sat on the floor of the darkened kitchen, the blue light of my mom's laptop biting into my tired eyes. I hadn't changed my clothes in 4 days. My skin felt tacky and grimy. I clicked on her social media page, the scroll of the mouse wheel the only sound in the room. There she was. The photo was glowing. She was sitting at a table made of white marble, overlooking a skyline that looked like it was built out of diamonds. In front of her was a plate of seared scallops and a glass of something bubbling in gold. She was laughing, her hair perfect, her skin tanned. The caption read, "Finally breathing. No anchors, no weights. Just me and the horizon. Hashtag Dubai life, hashtag freedom." I was the anchor. I was the weight. My stomach gave a violent liquid growl, a cramp so sharp I had to double over. I reached into the plastic bag and pulled out the first jar of generic peanut butter. My fingers were shaking so hard I could barely grip the lid. When the seal popped, it made a tiny hollow sound. I didn't have a clean spoon, so I used a plastic one I'd found in the back of a junk drawer. I took 1 level spoonful. That was the ration. 1 spoon for the whole day. The paste was thick and oily. It stuck to the roof of my mouth instantly. Without water to wash it down, it felt like I was trying to swallow a ball of cold clay. My throat constricted, a panicked, tight feeling rising in my chest as I fought the urge to gag. I forced it down, my eyes watering. Every swallow felt like a victory and a defeat at the same time. I closed the jar, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Then, a notification pinged on the top right of the laptop screen, an email icon. The subject line read, "Confirmation of one-way ticket and overseas relocation." My breath hitched. I clicked it. It wasn't a round-trip flight. The departure was 6 days ago, but there was no return date. Underneath it was an attachment, a signed lease for a studio apartment in the Dubai Marina. The start date was 3 weeks ago. She hadn't gone on a vacation. She had moved. She had taken the $10 and the independent speech and used them to buy my silence while she disappeared forever. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in the tears I didn't even know were falling. A sudden, heavy thud echoed from the front of the house. I scrambled to the window, staying low to the floor, my heart trying to kick its way out of my chest. A man in a cheap suit was standing on our lawn. He wasn't the waterman. He was holding a heavy wooden stake and a mallet. With one loud, final crack, he drove the stake into the dirt. He reached into his bag and hung a bright red sign on it. It didn't say "for sale." In giant block letters, it read, "Foreclosed. Property of National Bank. All occupants must vacate immediately." I wasn't just hungry and thirsty anymore. I was a squatter in a house that didn't belong to me, waiting for a mother who had already deleted me from her life. It was day 10. My stomach wasn't even growling anymore. It was just a cold, heavy hole behind my belly button. Every time I stood up, the room tilted like a ship in a storm. My tongue felt like a piece of dry carpet, thick and useless against the roof of my mouth. I had spent the last 2 hours licking the condensation off a half-frozen bag of peas I found in the bottom of the chest freezer. It was the only water left in the house. I crawled into my mom's office. The air in here still smelled like her, expensive floral perfume and the leather of her designer handbags. It made my throat tighten with a mix of missing her and wanting to scream. I needed a way to make this real. If I was going to disappear into the cracks of this foreclosed house, I wasn't going to go quietly. I rummaged through the bottom desk drawer, my nails scratching against the wood. My fingers snagged on a black nylon strap. I pulled it out. It was an old Sony Handycam, the kind she used to film my birthdays before she decided I was an anchor. I flipped the screen open. The battery bar blinked red, a tiny, dying heart. I found a thick, leather-bound notebook next to it. I grabbed a Sharpie, and with hands that wouldn't stop shivering, I wrote in giant, jagged letters on the first page, Day 10, the price of independence. I propped the camera up on a stack of fashion magazines. I hit the red button. The little light flickered on, casting a bloody glow over my face in the darkened room. "My name is Sydney," I said. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. I held up the single-dollar bill and the handful of change I had left. "This is what's left of the $10. The water is gone, the gas is gone, and my mom isn't on vacation." I leaned closer to the lens, making sure the camera caught the way my collarbones were starting to poke through my shirt like knives. She moved to Dubai. She bought a one-way ticket. She left me here to see if I was independent enough to survive a foreclosure. I reached out to turn the camera off, but then I saw something. A small blue play icon was flashing in the corner of the screen. There was a saved clip from the night before she left. I pressed play. The screen filled with my mom's face. She was glowing, holding a glass of wine, looking directly into the camera. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking to someone named Marcus. "I'm doing it," she whispered into the mic, her voice bubbly and light. "I'm leaving the kid. The bank is taking the house in a few weeks anyway, so it won't be my problem. By the time anyone realizes she's alone, I'll be halfway across the world with a new name and a new life. It's the perfect exit, Marcus. No more baggage, no more anchors." The video ended. The silence that followed was so loud it made my ears ring. She hadn't just forgotten. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had used me as a distraction for the bank while she made her escape. I felt a sudden icy chill that had nothing to do with the lack of heat. I gripped the Handycam so hard the plastic ground. I had my evidence. I had the confession. Then the floorboards in the hallway creaked. It wasn't the house settling. It was the heavy, rhythmic thud of work boots on hardwood. A key turned in the front door, not a gentle turn, but the harsh, metallic grind of a locksmith's tool. "Clear it out," a man's voice boomed from the foyer. "Bank says the property is vacant. Anything left inside goes straight to the dumpster. Start with the furniture in the living room." My heart jumped into my throat, hammering so fast I thought I might faint. I wasn't supposed to be here. To the bank, I was just more baggage to be tossed in the trash. I scrambled under the desk, clutching the camera to my chest, my breath coming in shallow, jagged gasps as the footsteps grew louder, heading straight for the office door. The darkness didn't fall, it crashed. I was still huddled under the desk, my knees pressed against my chest when the heartbeat of the house stopped. The low, constant buzz of the refrigerator, the only sound that made the kitchen feel alive, simply flatlined. The tiny red light on the Handycam died. The hallway light, which had been a dim yellow sliver under the door, vanished. It was a total, absolute blackout. "Power's gone," a man's voice grunted from the hallway. He sounded close, maybe 5 feet away. "I can't see a damn thing in here." "Forget it," another voice answered, muffled by the heavy air. "It's a tomb. We aren't hauling furniture in the dark and breaking our necks. Boss said we'll bring the floodlights and the generator tomorrow morning. Let's get out of here before the storm breaks." Their heavy boots thundered away, retreating toward the foyer. The front door slammed with a metallic ring that vibrated through the floorboards and into my teeth. I stayed under the desk for a long time, my breath coming in shallow, jagged hitches. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribcage, beating against the bone. I was alone in the dark. No lights, no heat. And in a few hours, when the sun came up, the men with the generators would be back to finish the job. My throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. The thirst was a sharp, localized pain now, throbbing behind my eyes. I crawled out from under the desk, my hands skimming the floor, until I found the plastic bag from Miller's Grocery. I fumbled inside for the empty peanut butter jars I'd finished and a large stainless steel mixing bowl from the bottom cabinet. A low rumble of thunder shook the windows. Then came the tapping, soft at first, then a frantic, rhythmic drumming against the roof. Rain. I scrambled toward the back door, my shins barking against the corner of the kitchen island. I didn't cry out. I just bit my lip until I tasted copper and kept moving. I fumbled with the deadbolt, the cold metal biting into my thumb, and shoved the door open. The air was freezing, smelling of wet asphalt and worms. The rain came down in gray sheets, blurring the backyard into a smudged painting. I stepped out onto the porch, the wind whipping my thin t-shirt against my skin. I felt the goosebumps rise instantly, a prickly, stinging cold that made my muscles lock up. I set the mixing bowl under the rusted drip of the gutter. Clink, clink, splash. I didn't wait. I held one of the empty jars out into the downpour, watching the water swirl inside the plastic. It looked gray and tasted like the shingle grit from the roof, metallic and bitter, but it was wet. I drank it in huge, desperate gulps, the coldness hitting my stomach like a block of ice. I choked, water spilling down my chin and soaking my collar, but I couldn't stop. When the jar was empty, I sat on the wet porch boards and let the rain soak me. I looked up at the sky, the clouds a bruised purple. My mom was probably in a room with climate control, drinking bottled water that cost more than my life. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold, hard shape of the handycam. I hadn't just collected water. I had recorded the sound of the bankmen. I had the proof that they were coming to throw a child into the street. The high tension of the movers leaving had crashed into a deep, hollow exhaustion. I crawled back inside, shivering so hard my teeth clattered together. I dragged a rug over to the kitchen corner, curled into a ball, and waited for the gray light of morning. I had water, but tomorrow I wouldn't have a house. The morning light was a cold, thin gray that leaked through the kitchen blinds. I woke up on the floor, my face pressed against the rough, dusty fibers of the area rug. My skin felt like it was 2 sizes too small for my face. When I tried to sit up, a sharp, white-hot spike of pain drove itself into the base of my skull. My vision swam, turning the kitchen into a blur of jagged shadows. I was burning up, but my hands were ice cold. I crawled toward the bathroom, my knees clicking against the hardwood. The house was silent, except for the wet, heavy sound of my own breath. I reached up and grabbed the edge of the porcelain sink, hauling myself up until I was eye level with the mirror. I didn't scream, mostly because I didn't have the air for it. The girl in the glass wasn't me. Her face was a series of sharp, ugly angles. Her eyes were sunken into deep, purple hollows, and her skin had the color of wet sidewalk. My hair was a matted bird's nest at the back of my head. I touched my collarbone, feeling the hard, prominent ridge of the bone poking through my thin Gap t-shirt. I looked like a ghost that hadn't realized it was dead yet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Sony Handycam. The plastic felt heavy, like a lead weight. I flipped the screen. The red battery icon gave one final, desperate blink. 1%. I leaned my back against the cold tile wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I held the camera up, my arm shaking so hard the lens rattled. I hit the red button. Day 21, I whispered. The sound was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on wood. Week 3 is almost over. I think I have a fever. My head feels like it's full of hot lead. I looked directly into the lens, my eyes stinging. I thought about the white marble tables in Dubai. I thought about the gold leaf coffee and the scallops. I thought about the one-way ticket and the new name she was probably already using. Mom, I said, my voice cracking, I followed your rules. I stayed independent. I didn't tell the neighbors. I didn't call for help when the water stopped. I stayed quiet when the bankman came to the door. I felt a single hot tear track a line through the grime on my cheek. I hope Dubai was worth this, I said, because when they find me, they're going to find this camera, and everyone is going to know that you didn't leave a daughter behind. You left a crime. The screen flickered, turned green, and then went black. The battery was dead. The silence of the house rushed back in, heavier than before. I sat there in the dark, clutching the dead camera to my chest. My stomach gave a long, slow twist, but there was nothing left to growl, just a hollow, empty ache. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the front of the house. It sounded like wood splintering. Then came the low, mechanical roar of a generator starting up in the driveway. The vibration hummed through the floor, rattling the teeth in my head. They were back, and they weren't knocking this time. I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning so fast I had to grab the towel rack to stay upright. I didn't have anywhere to go. The back door was a death trap, and the front was crawling with men who thought the house was empty. I looked at the small, frosted window above the toilet. It led to the side yard, right behind the overgrown hedge. It was the only way out. I grabbed my notebook, shoved the camera into my waistband, and started to climb, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps as the sound of a sledgehammer hit the front door. The mulch was cold and smelled like rotting wood against my cheek. I had squeezed through the bathroom window and dropped into the narrow gap between the house and the overgrown privet hedge. My skin was stinging from the scratch of the branches, and the fever made the damp earth feel like it was vibrating. Inside, the house was screaming. Thud, crack, smash. That was the sound of my life being hollowed out. I heard the movers grunting as they dragged the heavy oak dresser across the floorboards. Then came the metallic roar of the dumpster being filled in the driveway. Crash! That was probably the kitchen table. Crash! Maybe my bookshelf. I pressed my back against the brick foundation, clutching the notebook and the dead camera to my chest. My breath was shallow, a hot, dry rasp that made my throat feel like it was filled with broken glass. I was so small now. I felt like a shadow, something that could just blow away if the wind picked up. "Excuse me, hello?" The voice was sharp, cutting through the roar of the generator. I froze. I knew that voice. It was Mrs. Gable from 2 doors down. She was the one who always complained about our lawn being too long. I peered through the tangled branches of the hedge. Mrs. Gable was standing at the edge of the driveway, clutching the leash of her yapping terrier, Sparky. She was squinting at the movers, her face pinched with confusion. "Can I help you, ma'am?" one of the men asked. He was wearing a sweat-stained shirt with "Elite Hauling" stitched on the pocket. "The girl," Mrs. Gable said, her voice wavering. "Sydney, is she in there? I haven't seen her mother's car in weeks, but I thought I saw a light in the window a few nights ago." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, uneven beat. This is it, I thought. Just stand up, push through the leaves, tell her you're hungry, tell her you're thirsty, tell her the water is gone. My hand reached out, my fingers brushing a damp leaf. I could almost taste the glass of cold water she'd give me. I could smell the toast in her kitchen. The independent mask was cracking. I was 12, and I wanted to be saved. "House is vacant, lady," the mover said, wiping his forehead with a grimy rag. Elite Hauling said abandoned property. We went through the whole place. Nobody's in there but the spiders and some trash. But I'm sure I saw... Look, the man interrupted, pointing to the red foreclosure sign. Owner skipped out, probably took the kid with her. We're just here to clear the grit so the bank can flip it. Mrs. Gable stood there for a second, her eyes scanning the front of the house. She looked right toward the hedge where I was shivering. I held my breath, the air burning in my lungs. "See me," I pleaded silently. "Don't see me," my head whispered back. Then I thought about the video. I thought about my mom's voice on the handycam. No more baggage, no more anchors. If I walked out now, my mom would just say she made a mistake. She'd say she hired a sitter who didn't show up. She'd lie her way out of it like she always did. But if I stayed, if I recorded the movers tossing my bed into the trash, if I showed the world exactly what abandoned looked like, the evidence wasn't finished. The 42 days weren't up. I pulled my hand back and curled into a ball in the dirt. I watched through the leaves as Mrs. Gable sighed, tucked her dog under her arm, and turned away. She walked back toward her house, her footsteps fading into the distance. The mover spat on the driveway and went back inside. I was alone again. The high of almost being caught crashed into a deep, shaking low. I looked at the foreclosed sign. My house was gone. My stuff was in a dumpster. But I still had the notebook. I opened it to the next page and wrote, "Day 22. They think I'm trash. I'm going to make sure she pays for every single piece." The floor was cold, harder than it used to be. The movers had taken the rugs. They had taken the couch where I used to watch cartoons. Now, the living room was just a vast, echoing box of shadows and dust motes. My body felt like it was made of dry sticks. Every time I moved, my joints made a small clicking sound that seemed to bounce off the bare walls. It was day 38. 4 days left. I dragged myself across the hardwood, my fingernails scratching against the floor. I didn't have the strength to walk anymore. Standing up made the world go black for 5 seconds, a cold wave of nausea rolling through my gut. I reached into my bag and pulled out a roll of masking tape I'd scavenged from the garage. I had work to do. I taped the empty, grease-smeared Miller's peanut butter jar to the center of the kitchen counter. It sat there like a trophy. I took a Sharpie and wrote on the granite, "Dinner, days 1 to 14. Next to it, I laid out the packages of ramen. I hadn't eaten the last 2. I couldn't. My stomach had shrunk into a tight, painful knot that rejected everything but sips of rainwater. I arranged the crinkly plastic wrappers in a perfect row. Under them, I wrote, "The budget." I crawled to the foyer. My breath was coming in short, whistly gasps. My heart felt thin like a fluttering leaf. I took the $10 wrapper, the one that had held the bill that was supposed to be my graduation, and taped it to the inside of the front door at eye level. She wouldn't be able to walk in without seeing it. In the middle of the empty living room where the TV used to be, I placed the Sony Handycam and the leather notebook. I opened the notebook to the middle. I'd used the last of my energy to draw a map of my ribs. I'd traced the hollows of my cheeks in the mirror. I was the only piece of furniture left in this house. I sat back against the wall, my head lolling to the side. The house smelled like nothing now, just wood and cold air. The evidence was everywhere. I'd written dates on the baseboards. Day 15, no water. Day 24, fever. Day 31, the bank took the bed. I closed my eyes. The reality of the hunger was different now. It wasn't a sharp pain anymore. It was a humming, a low, vibrating hum that felt like it was coming from my bones. I was a skeleton draped in a dirty t-shirt, waiting in a tomb. Suddenly, The sound of a car engine rumbled in the distance. It wasn't the heavy growl of the mover's truck. It was a smooth, high-end purr, a luxury SUV. My eyes snapped open. My pulse gave a weak, thready jump. She was early. The car door clicked shut. Then came the sound of heels, sharp, rhythmic stabs against the driveway. Clack, clack, clack. She was coming. She was going to walk into a house that didn't belong to her, looking for a daughter she'd traded for a tan and a fake name. I gripped the edge of the baseboard, my knuckles white and bony. I wasn't ready to be saved, but I was ready to be seen. "Sydney," her voice called out. It sounded musical, light, completely untouched by the hell I'd been living in. "Honey, I'm back. You won't believe the shopping I did." The key slid into the lock. The tumblers turned. I pulled the notebook to my chest and waited for the door to open on the crime scene I had spent 6 weeks dying to build. The door swung open and the heat of the outside world rushed into the foyer, carrying the scent of expensive sandalwood and airport terminal. It hit the stagnant, freezing air of the house like a physical blow. Then came the bags. 6 glossy shopping bags from the Dubai Mall, Chanel, Gucci, Bloomingdale's, hitting the floor with a series of soft, expensive thuds. "Sydney? God, why is it so dark in here?" My mother stepped into the house. She was wearing a cream-colored silk jumpsuit that shimmered even in the shadows. Her skin was a deep honey-colored tan. She looked like a magazine. She looked like she belonged in a world where hunger was a choice, not a cage. She reached for the light switch, clicking it up and down. Click, click. "What is going on with the power?" she grumbled, her voice sharp with annoyance. She turned, her eyes landing on the front door. I watched from the floor of the dining room, my chin resting on my bony knees. I saw her stop. Her hand went to her throat, her long manicured nails digging into her skin. The single empty $10 wrapper was taped right where I'd left it, exactly at her eye level. "Sydney?" Her voice wavered. She took a step further into the living room, her heels echoing like hammer strikes on the bare wood. She stopped dead. The furniture was gone. The rugs were gone. The house was an empty, echoing ribcage of white walls and dust. She saw the kitchen counter, the 2 empty jars of generic peanut butter, the dinner labels I'd written in thick black marker. "What? Where is the couch? Where's the TV?" She was spinning in a circle now, the silk of her jumpsuit rustling like dry leaves. Her breath was coming in short, panicked bursts that I could hear from across the room. "Sydney? This isn't funny. Where are you?" I didn't move. I didn't want to break the silence yet. I wanted her to feel the cold. I wanted her to smell the stale air of the home she'd signed away. She walked into the center of the room and tripped over the Sony Handycam I'd left on the floor. It skidded across the wood with a hollow plastic sound. She looked down and saw the notebook open to the page where I'd traced the sharp, jagged line of my own ribs. Then she saw me. I was huddled in the corner, a small gray shadow. My collarbones poked through my shirt like knives. My hair was a matted knot of grease and grit. I looked at her with eyes that felt too large for my skull, eyes that hadn't seen a friendly face in 42 days. She let out a sound, a choked, wet gasp. She dropped her designer purse and a gold-plated lipstick rolled across the floor, stopping at my feet. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She ran toward me, her expensive perfume filling my nose. It was too much. It smelled like a lie. She reached out to touch my arm, but I flinched back, my spine hitting the baseboard with a dull, hollow thud. My skin felt electric, terrified of her touch. "Don't," I rasped. My voice was a ghost's voice, thin and dry. "I'm independent now. Isn't that what you wanted?" "Sydney, oh my God, what happened? Why is the house empty? Why are you're so small?" She was shaking so hard the gold chains on her neck were jingling. Her tan looked like a mask now, sickly and fake against the white of her terrified face. "The bank took the house, Mom." I pointed a trembling finger at the kitchen. "The waterman took the water. The movers took the bed. I just stayed here with my $10. I recorded it all for you." She looked around the empty room, her eyes darting from the evidence labels on the walls to the pile of blue-lighted electronics. She realized then that this wasn't a mistake she could talk her way out of. Outside, the first low wail of a siren began to rise through the neighborhood silence. I had timed the email. I had timed the evidence. The grand return was over. "Who called them?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Sydney, what did you do?" I didn't answer. I just held the notebook to my chest and watched the blue and red lights begin to strobe against the empty white walls. The sirens didn't just howl, they screamed. The blue and red lights slashed through the empty house, turning the white walls into a frantic strobe. My mom was scrambling now, her heels skidding on the bare floor as she tried to shove her glossy Chanel shopping bags behind the kitchen island. "Sydney, tell them it was a mistake," she hissed, her face contorted in a mask of panic. She reached for me, her tanned fingers trembling. "Tell them you had a sitter who didn't show up. Tell them I sent money. Tell them you're okay." I didn't blink. I didn't move. My heart felt like a cold, heavy stone in my chest, a weight I'd been carrying since the taxi pulled away 6 weeks ago. I pointed to the laptop still sitting on the granite counter, its screen glowing with a sent confirmation. "I didn't have to tell them anything," I said. My voice was a dry rattle, like dead leaves on a sidewalk. "The camera did. I set the email to send an hour before you arrived. Every video log, every picture of the independence you gave me, the school, the police, and Grandma, they saw it all before you even stepped off the plane." The front door was shoved open. 2 officers in dark blue uniforms burst in, their heavy boots thumping on the hollow wood. One had a flashlight that cut through the shadows, the beam landing right on me. "Oh, God," the officer breathed. He didn't look at my mom, he looked at me. He saw the sharp, skeletal line of my wrists. He saw the generic peanut butter jars taped to the counter. He saw the jagged evidence markings on the baseboards. He saw the crime scene she had spent 42 days building with her neglect. My mom tried to step forward, her silk jumpsuit shimmering under the harsh flashlight. "Officers, there's been a massive misunderstanding. I was just on a business trip to Dubai, and the person I hired—" "Save it," the older officer snapped. He didn't even let her finish the lie. He grabbed her arm, the one with the gold watch, and spun her around. The metallic clack-clack of the handcuffs was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in 42 days. It was louder than the hunger. It was sharper than the thirst. It was the sound of the anchor finally breaking. She started to scream then. She screamed about her rights, about the bank, and about how I was a difficult child who had set her up. They led her out past her designer shopping bags, past the $10 wrapper taped to the door, and into the back of a cruiser. The house was finally quiet again. 6 months later, the world is different. I live with my grandmother now. She makes me oatmeal with real cinnamon in the mornings, and she never asks me to be independent. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still find myself reaching for the underside of my pillow to make sure I haven't hidden any crackers there. It's a habit I can't quite kill. My mother is still in a facility, waiting for a trial she can't talk her way out of. She sends letters, but I don't open them. I don't need her words anymore. I have my own. I'm 12 years old, and I finally know what real independence is. It's not surviving on $10 in rainwater. It's having the power to tell the truth, even when it burns the house down. I'm a kid again, and that is the only graduation I ever needed.
But justice doesn't stop here. Click the next video to watch another fuse catch fire.